Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Ben talks about herbicide carryover issues he observed in drought-stricken areas in Iowa. We chat about a few tips such as weed height and growing points and improving results from one pass and a second pass postemergence from Corteva's monthly Groundwork newsletter. Hear about the development of corn from V3 to V4 and managing your crop. And Joe talks about the benefits of PowerCore Enlist corn paired with our sliding line corn seed treatment.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben and Lynn, and Ben, you've been out in the field and seeing a lot of things. Bring us up to date.
Yeah, so the one I wanted to talk about first here is it's surprising with how wet this spring has been. We came across a handful of fields actually next to Eddyville, Iowa, which is south central Iowa. And this field had been experiencing lots of drought last year, less than 12 inches of rainfall. And I have Alex throw this picture up, but when we walked in the field, the grower was wondering what was wrong with these beans. Something didn't quite look right, wondering if it's a disease, looked like they're getting thinner and thinner. So me and Avery went out and took a look at it, and what we came up with were these beans. And the first thing that I noticed was the white symptomology that was associated with the leaves. I'm like, okay, well, it's probably a little bit of HPPD carryover. It was pretty dry last year. And something just wasn't quite sticking with me correctly. So, we started the agronomic process of asking lots of questions, just taking notes out in the field. The center of the field was pin drop clean. There wasn't hardly any weeds coming yet. The outside edges of the field had some grasses and stuff coming. The outside edges of the field didn't have this same symptomology that the inside of the field had. And what we ended up coming up with is this is a Resicor. Resicor had been sprayed on that field April 15th of last year, and they went through severe drought, less than 10 to 12 inches of rainfall, and this was in multiple field after field, and this is what the combination of Stinger and Callisto, which are two components of Resicor, happens when there's no rainfall. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to link to a video of Kris Ehler and Aaron Hager. So they had this issue in central Illinois, Champaign County, Illinois last year, and Kris and Aaron give a really nice talk for about 25 minutes. So if you want to dive deeper into this subject, but a key point that I wanted to share with growers that Aaron Hager was talking about is it's not necessarily the weather after the herbicide application was made. It has a lot to do with the weather before the herbicide application was made as well. So when you have multiple years of compounding drought, you go out and you spray that herbicide on the field. Well, if the field is so dry and you catch like a couple tenths, which is about what we've been seeing, enough to activate that herbicide, but basically get it to move down into the soil, and then it goes right back off to hot and dry again, the herbicide itself will bind extremely tightly to the soil colloids. If it's not in solution, it's not being diluted by the bacteria and the moisture that breaks herbicide down. So I thought that was really interesting, something to keep an eye on. Resicor is a phenomenal product. It's a great corn pre. There's a lot of guys that will split Resicor half and half. There's a whole bunch of premix corn herbicide programs that have a lot of the similar active ingredients as what Resicor has, and I think pre's are extremely important, but this is just it's an unfortunate circumstance when we're coming out of a drought and we still see these things that carry over. So
yeah, we've got spoiled over the years. During the Roundup years, we just sprayed Roundup and we called it a day, and we never had injury, and things were simple. But now we're back to, like I'd almost say, the 60s and 70s, where we have to put some pretty harsh stuff down to make sure that we control weeds, and if we don't, we fight them.
Right. So the second picture that I have from that field is a water hemp plant that is bleached out on top. So you would see that coming out of the Callisto camp. HPPDs are pigment inhibitors, sometimes also known as bleaching herbicides. So you can see that the water hemp itself is working its way, trying to metabolize through the HPPDs. And then when you look at the very last picture that we have here, there is a Stinger is a group 4 herbicide, so it's a growth regulator product. Growth regulator products try to grow the plant to death. So like that's why dandelions or water hemp curls when you spray it with 2,4-D and dicamba, because the cell division is happening so rapidly and the plant can't handle it that it eventually kills itself. You can see in the what really made me think that, okay, this just isn't the group 27 that's working against these plants. You can see the elongated leaves. You can see growing points, the soybean plant growing out of the cotyledons where the marker is showing right there, so that plant's messed up. The hormones aren't giving that plant the correct direction. You can also kind of see the same symptomology of like an off-target dicamba drift issue where the leaves are kind of cupped or they're kind of goofy looking coming out as new growth. So I'm going to have a little bit more of an update on this next week, because in the video that Kris Ehler had, he was talking about his father-in-law stand, and I was just curious if they left it, if they replanted it, what they did with it, and how it turned out. And him and I haven't been able to connect on that yet. So the grower in this individual instance is going to wait a week and see if that plant continues new growth, because I think it will. Hopefully the plant can get down below where the herbicide activation zone is, or where the herbicide is the heaviest, and the plant will eventually grow out of it is the hope. But if the pictures from the video with Aaron Hager and Kris talk about it's the worst carryover of Stinger that he has ever seen, I would say that this is as bad, if not worse, because it's actually taking plants out. So,
and just remember, obviously, anytime your plants are not looking perfect, it's definitely a concerning moment. But yield's not being made right now in soybeans, so we're still okay, and we'll be fine for the most part.
Right. So that's one herbicide topic. The second herbicide topic, Corteva does a nice job. They put out a Groundwork email. They put an article out every week. It's called their Groundwork article. And if you wanted to subscribe to that, you can find that on the Corteva website. But I just wanted to point out and throw these pictures up. It shows the ideal weed height and how many growing points that water hemp plants have on them. And I want guys to continue to think about that as they're getting ready to make post applications in their beans. 2-inch water hemp plant has 9 growing points on it, an average of 9 growing points. A 3 to 4-inch water hemp will have 14 growing points, and a 4 to 6-inch water hemp will have 18 growing points. And we always want to be spraying water hemp when it's less than 6 inches tall to get the best efficacy out of the sprays that we use. And that is for the reason right there. I mean, it has so many growing points. If you don't have enough active ingredient, whether that be Roundup systemically coming through and killing the growing points, or if it would be a Liberty style product where you have to cover every single growing point. That's why weeds are easier to control, is because there's less growing points to kill off, and you have to kill off every single one of them. So wanted to put that out there as the posts are starting to happen or getting pretty close to happening. And then also in this Groundwork article from Corteva, they talk about improving results from a 1-pass post-emergence, and then improving results from a second post-pass, post-emergence pass. And in that, this basically states that the biggest gun that we have with Enlist E3 soybeans is glufosinate, Liberty, and 2,4-D together. They are the most efficacious combination when it comes to killing weeds. It's about 10%. Versus that combination is about 10% better versus Liberty alone, 5% better than Enlist 1 and glyphosate, and about 5% better than Liberty and glyphosate. So
it's important, when you're applying the Enlist 1, is to add one of those 2 components, either Roundup or Liberty.
Correct.
And Liberty gives you 2 effective modes of action against water hemp.
Right. Yep, it's and the price of Liberty, we've said it a couple times before, but the price of Liberty has came down. It's not as expensive to spray, so I would definitely be looking at getting the Liberty and the Enlist one together, because I was talking with a grower this week. He's like, man, I just really don't like using, we were in a kind of a situation there with working with PowerCore corn, and man, I just really don't like using 2,4-D in the corn program when we're using it every year in the bean program. And I said, dead weeds don't reproduce seed. So as long as you're doing everything in your power to kill everything in your power and you're getting 100% control, we shouldn't have a resistance issue. So spend a little bit extra money and make sure you're killing what's out there. Joe also asked me to talk about one more time, as we're getting ready to start in on the posts, is the antagonism between volunteer corn killers and 2,4-D and dicamba. If you go to the Corteva website, it'll walk you through this a little bit when it comes to, I think it's Enlist Ahead is the name of the website. FOPs and DIMs are two different classes of corn, volunteer corn killers in soybeans, and there's a large amount of antagonism between the group 4 growth regulators that we had previously talked about, so 2,4-D and dicamba. That antagonism requires you to use 50% more product than like the lowest labeled rate product. So if guys are going out there at the lowest,
to get the same control, right?
Right, to get the same control. So if you're going out at the lowest labeled rate and it's been working for you, if you haven't used 2,4-D and dicamba, you want to use at least 50% more. And it also talks about, I think it might be in this Groundwork article too, that crop oil is very important. Crop oil, methylated seed oil, one of those two products is important when it comes to killing volunteer corn.
You know, as you know, we put out a lot of seed production, and then sometimes we have farmers say, "Oh, I sprayed for the volunteer corn," and well, they put the Enlist one in with the standard rate of those volunteer corn products, and they're just not effective at the standard rate. So we're just trying to give everybody a heads up not to waste your money by planting or using too low a rate when you're using Enlist one in your tank mix.
Yep, and as a side note too there, you know, guys ask, well, if I just post with Liberty and I don't have Liberty tolerant corn, well that'll kill the corn. Well, my experience has been when you want corn to die, when you're spraying Liberty, it does not die. If you're spraying a cornfield right next to you and you're having a little bit of a drift issue, you'll kill 3 or 4 rows in on non-Liberty corn. So,
and one of the reasons why is because it grows in clumps, and so you can't cover all the growing points.
Right.
With when it's in a big clump, it's like the ones underneath are insulated, and they're just not going to get any Liberty in it. So you'll peel it off on the outside, but you still got the core still alive.
Yep. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover as we're thinking about post on beans. What do you got, Lynn?
Yeah. So in my travels this week, was looking at some cornfields and had some questions for some growers, and I just wanted to kind of have a back and forth with you a little bit. So what a little bit of the concern is the first plant of corn is now what I would say out of that ugly duckling stage, and we're into probably some nitrogen, and we're really starting to even up across the field. Some of the stuff that was planted, if they caught a window in that first part of May, we're seeing a lot of variability, and the stand is fine, but as far as the development of the crop is anywhere from V3 to potentially V4, and then we have some stuff in the low-lying areas that are down at that V1, potentially V2. So just a lot of variance within that. And the question that I've gotten is, how do I manage that? Do I manage it from the standpoint of my earliest development, or do I manage it for the latest when I'm looking at post applications, potential side dress? Do I give up on it? Just those general questions. So I'm going to throw it to you here a little bit. So when you're looking at that, when you have a field that's highly variable, do you go off of the most mature plant that you have out there, or do you go back to what is the least mature plant when you're looking at the the establishment for making those decisions? Yeah,
you always have to go for the most mature plant, because the most mature plant, and I haven't really thought this all the way through, but this is my first initial gut reaction. You always go for the most mature plant, because that hopefully the larger portion of the biggest percentage of the field is the most mature plant, because the most mature plant is going to be probably the highest yielding, because it's seen the least amount of stress. It hasn't seen the waterlogged soils as much. So hopefully the whole field's not, like I said, that direction. because it's probably the highest yielding portion of the field, because the water has drained away from it, you don't want to be going in there off-label application on herbicides and dinging up the potential yield from those areas. From a side dress standpoint, I think I would be out in those fields as soon as possible to try to even them up. If you're side dressing, not top dressing, but if you're side dressing nitrogen, we talked about it probably a couple times this year already about how dragging that knife or that anhydrous coulter, introducing oxygen into the soil, making those cracks that haven't happened yet. If you can mechanically do that, it's going to push along those areas that are behind, and hopefully they catch up and don't experience too much yield loss. But getting out there and doing that as soon as possible would probably be the greatest recommendation.
And when we look at beans, from that standpoint, what do you look at when we're staging this as far as making decisions on spotting in, and when we're looking at different areas that are potentially a little bit lower, for the guys that have a lot of the planters now have the no-till coulters on the front. We've talked about it on replant situations on that, but what are you comfortable leaving for pockets as far as the question always is I have a really, really good stand. I have 40 acres of hypothetically 40 acre field. You got 38 acres that are perfect, and you've got 2 acres that are not ideal. But in my scenario, the fields that I have, you got to drive through the 38 acres to get down to the 2. At what point in the calendar do you I don't want to say abandon the crop, but do you potentially weigh the outcome of tearing up a little bit of your really good stand to get down to the bottom from a weed control standpoint?
I from a weed control standpoint, I'd push pretty late into the year, because you can always plant your way in and plant your way out. Realistically, if the beans are V2 to V3 driving over them, it's no different than rolling. I mean, there's a little bit more compaction associated with it, but you don't do as much damage as one would think getting through the field to the 2 acres, unless it's a really long, narrow field. You know what I'm talking about? But
that's the legume properties of soybeans. They have a little bit of a flexibility or a bounce to them as we drive through them.
If you don't control the weeds, it's going to cost you at some point in time because the weeds, sunlight's never wasted. You're always going to have weeds. I would want something to figure out to canopy at some point in time, whether that be spreading them, planting them, doing something to get ground cover that you may get something off of. If nothing else, it's just ground cover that.
Well, the weed control aspect of it is probably more important than the yield aspect. You're planting more beans out there. I mean, a soybean can compensate 18 inches in any direction, 18 inches. So if you got an 18-inch gap and then you have, a decent stand and another 18-inch gap, you don't worry about it, because the soybeans will either come from either side, particularly if you're in 15-inch rows. But the reality of it is the weed control, like you said, sunlight's never wasted. That's the number one reason why you'd go back in and add more plants, because you're not going to hold the weed control, and then the weeds are going to cost you yield. But if you could manage the weeds, a thin stand, I think the bottom population that you want would be 40,000 before you're going to see major yield reduction, which everybody's going to say that's crazy. Well, let me tell you a little factoid here about the increase of soybeans in the breeding stage. We will plant soybeans, our program that we're associated with will plant soybeans at 6 pounds per acre. 6 pounds per acre. And they will yield in most years 85% of normal at 6 pounds per acre. And that's how we take a small amount of seed and blow it up really, really fast. And we've been doing it for decades. I mean, our program that we're associated with for breeding it, been doing it for decades, but nobody would leave a stand of 6 pounds per acre and expect to get 85%. But the key is you have to have weed control. And so then you're investing one way or the other. You either invest in more seed to put more plants out there, or invest in more herbicide.
Right. So for the guys that think about it in population, 6 pounds per acre would be 6 times 3,000 seeds per pound. That would be 18,000 plants per acre. 85%.
So it's more of an emotional thing than a logical thing. And I totally get it. I totally get it. I mean, I'd rather have that population. I mean, because the weeds will be there for sure.
Right. And if you think about like the guys that do early post by the time harvest season comes, you don't see the sprayer tracks.
Correct.
I mean, it's kind of the same concept to me. Yeah, you're gonna have more wheels going out there, but I personally, on our own farm, we still have spots of standing water, and we just planted around them when the rest of the field was fit. Well, for another 3 weeks, we'll still go back out and put something there to shade out, because what you're gonna have is cockleburrs, water hemp,
Correct.
all the other stuff when it comes to the end of the year that will probably have already gone to seed. So yeah, we'll still go out for quite a while yet and get those holes stuck in.
I think the biggest point that I would have from that standpoint is if you got the no-till coulters on the front, make sure that you're compensating a little bit as you're planting through. If you've got a good stand of say 120,000, I wouldn't be afraid to plant your way to it, like you were talking about, because what we run into the risk on the no-till coulter is physically pulling that plant up out of the ground and chucking it out. So if you're planting your way in and planting your way out, you're probably going to take care of yourself there. Even if you turn the thing on at a half rate or whatever, that as long as you've got something covering that up. And for the most part, like you mentioned, most places are in that stand where that bean is in that alfalfa, what we call the legume stage, that even if you had your planter all the way up, ran it over, it's going to stand back up. The guys with cover crops have been doing that for eons now, of doing it in the triticale. You potentially, what you might have is that thing will come back up and your first node might be just a little bit higher than the rest of it. But from a yield standpoint, we've not seen any issues from that.
So if you're interplanting into, and we'll have this little discussion about that, interplanting soybeans into an existing stand, just keep in mind the rule of thumb is for every week that you plant later, it's 1 day behind on maturity. So then you can adjust. If you planted a 3.9 and you want to go back in there and spend so many weeks, you might have to go to a 3.5 or a 3.6 to get them to even up.
Yep.
So just again, 1 week, 1 day later at harvest is a rule of thumb for soybeans.
I think it follows through true with wheat too.
Yep.
We're seeing how stuff matures out. So
I have two things besides my jokes that nobody likes, okay? The two things is, if we're just getting lots and lots of calls about the Merschman PowerCore corn, how great it looks, how it came out of the ground. I got to give Ben lots of credit for the seed treatment package you put on it. It's unlike anything that's out there. Helps it in cold and basically covers all the different diseases that are out there. So we had really high quality seed this year, and we're working with a extremely good company to produce that seed for us, fourth generation seed company. But anyhow, the bottom line is take a look at Merschman corn. If you've planted it and you haven't been back to the field, maybe put it next to another brand, you need to take a look at it, because there's some things we're doing that are different and some things that are going to benefit this fall to the farmers. The other thing is, if you're thinking about double cropping soybeans this year, Merschman Seeds is making a very aggressive move to provide double crop to our dealers. So check with your dealer if you need double crop seed for after your wheat, and we'd be more than happy to supply you with double crop, because we've got a good supply of beans. We can get you the right product, and we just want you to keep thinking mind about double cropping with these ultra earlies and soon going to hyper earlies. We got wheat coming off right now. And okay, I was sitting in my office and I heard somebody say something about it. The estimated yield on this wheat field was 200 some bushel an acre. What was that all about?
Yeah, so a grower opened up a field, or must have nosed into a field somewhere, and they said that the estimated amount of bushels in the tank was 345 bushels in the combine hopper, and according to his monitor, he had covered 1.6 acres. So the math came out to like 212 or something like that bushel per acre is what
uncalibrated.
Yeah, well, that's what the rough yield estimate was. So even if the acres are off just a little bit, it's the grower's extremely excited to get back.
It's at least 100, right?
Yep.
It's at least 100. Anyhow, if you haven't planted wheat, Merschman wheat, there's been game changers going on here the last few years. So we got wheat now is managed like a regular crop and does great things. And then with the maturities we got, you can take your marginal ground and outgross your corn ground now, $8 per acre, which is great.
And what an exciting year. I mean, June 6th, 7th, if it was dry enough, the entire southern half of Illinois would be rolling right now. If it was dry enough, they've been experiencing some rain, so they're crying a little bit, thinking about how every day that it rains on this wheat, the test weight's dropping a little bit. So, I mean, they're a little frustrated down there right now, but who would have thought you could get your double crop beans planted June 7th, June 8th?
Yeah.
So we've got wheat in northern Illinois that's beginning senescence in the first week of June. You've got seed production down in the Bay that's going to be rolling off potentially
next week.
5 days earlier than what it ever has before. And then you look at the board price on wheat right now. That's not a bad day. So you're selling it?
Yeah, and the farmers that planted a lot, you're selling the heck out of it, right, Ben? Mm-hmm. The farmers that planted a lot of wheat this last fall, they weren't stressing quite as much as the corn and soybean guys were, because they're looking at their field and it's growing great. You know, they had it planted and the rain's coming along. So, anyhow, back to the worst part of the program. Okay, I got 3 jokes, and I think one of them I might have told a while ago, but I thought, well, you know, once in a while maybe I ought to pull one out that was actually somewhat funny, but I'll hold that one to the end, okay? This one here is, we got a couple farm jokes here. What did the pig say on a hot summer day? What did the pig say on a hot summer day? I'm bacon. I'm bacon, okay? The kids will like that one. Yeah, okay. Now, this one here is not really a joke, but it's kind of a riddle. What runs around the farm but never moves? What runs around the farm but never moves? A fence. A fence. And lastly, I don't know about you, but I didn't sleep very well last night, okay? Last night I dreamt I was a muffler and I woke up exhausted.
We'll take it.
Okay. Well, anyhow, thanks for watching today. We sincerely appreciate your business. It's been a rough spring, but we're getting towards the end of it, and we hope that your family is healthy and safe. We'll see you next week.